All right, everything kind of got thrown up in the air tonight. We were going to talk. I had all these clips ready to go. We were going to talk about this Peter Thiel, Ross Douthat interview, and then Diane Montagna.
We even lost our sponsor right before the show.
We did. So
no, not really.
We didn't really, but we're Recusant Cellars. They're having a tricky time mailing wine in the hot summer months, so they're just going to pause for 2 months. So I think you might be able to still get our promo code in one last time before we pick back up in the fall. So use code BASED at Recusant Cellars, but that's the last time you're going to hear about them as a sponsor for a couple months. But even our intro video didn't actually match for this. But honestly, Eric, you're probably the perfect person to have on. The editor of Crisis Magazine for this. It's funny because we all kind of knew, right? Like nothing Diane released today was bombshell to us, but it's still kind of interesting to get the proof. But before we even get into that, Eric, you just put out a book. Is it still on pre-sale or is your book out now?
It's out now. Yeah, I got it right here. Moral Money: The Case for Bitcoin. So yeah, it just came out like 2 weeks ago. I was really happy I got on the Tom Woods show to talk about it. I don't know if you know who that is, but
I do.
That's a big deal. That was a big deal when I got on there because I actually was listening to Tom Woods' show in 2013 that got me into Bitcoin. And
Really?
So like to be on his show to talk about my book about Bitcoin 12 years later, that was pretty cool. And it's funny. I do a million of these interviews and I've been on, podcasts all the time. This is the first one I was nervous for.
The little fanboying,
huh? I told my wife to listen to it to see, can you tell? Because I admit I was nervous. I was like a little bit of a fanboy. I mean, I admit it. I was just like,
now you know how Anthony felt
fast.
you know how Anthony felt when he was on with you for the first time.
Yeah. Tom Woods is awesome because he wrote a book about how the Catholic Church built the West.
Yes.
So if nobody's ever checked that book out, like Tom Woods is known as a libertarian commentator, but he's also a Catholic.
Yeah.
And he wrote how the Catholic Church built Western civilization. I think that's the title. I might be off on the title.
He wrote a beautiful book after Summorum Pontificum about the Latin Mass. Yeah. And it's a beautiful little book. And it came out after Summorum Pontificum, and it was explaining kind of why is this a big deal. And he was like, it's a great little book. It's out of print now. But it's a great book. So it was great being on his show, and he's great. I mean, it was just like as soon as we jumped on before the show went live. He was very much just like we had known each other for years, and we had never talked in our life. So
he definitely knew of you though, because I remember listening to his shows a while back when he was reading 1 Peter 5 before you took over there. So if anybody doesn't know, Eric also is is Tim Flanders the editor at 1 Peter 5?
Tim Flanders is the editor of 1 Peter 5, and I'm kind of oversee it. And to be honest, though, I let Tim do what he wants. He'll check it. I'll check in with him sometimes. But at first I was very much kind of more managing it to make sure it's in the right vein and everything. But then I just like Tim's style. And so I just was like, you do what you want to do. And like I said, every once in a while, for example, when he wants to write about the Amish, he sometimes checks in with me to make sure it's okay.
I think we're going to do that conversation on locals tonight because you and I have we've mentioned to each other in DMs having that conversation just because like I'm always looking for the appropriate position to take as a Catholic on that question. But it's definitely more appropriate to do on locals just because it's just one of those things with the stupid algorithms. But also, I wanted to ask you, we've had Leo for 2 months now, right? I watched your episode with you, Kennedy, and Flanders when we initially got the white smoke. We had Tim Gordon on in that episode. We just kind of were like, oh my gosh, man, doom and gloom. We're like we thought the end of the world was coming. And then I kind of witnessed, I think probably Taylor was the first one to go, look, let's just give this guy some space a little bit, and I
well, Taylor didn't first say that.
No. He all of us had the same reaction.
God bless him. God bless him for then kind of backtracking and realizing, okay, let's take a step back. So,
yeah, I think my initial reaction was just what my raw reaction was in the moment. I mean, we all were hoping for a longer period before we got the white. So every one of us, I mean, we were like, the longer this thing goes, the better news it is for us, because that means the conservatives put up a little bit. Anthony, I want to run with you at the TLM. I like Eric. Eric's funny.
That was pretty funny, actually.
We've been goofing around with each other a little bit. So yeah, we had that was just my raw reaction to him coming in. And then I think it was kind of appropriate for us to not have the new Pope come into a posture of hostility from trads until we kind of see what he does. What do you think? You think that was the right approach to take?
I do. I really do. I mean, I think you know, maybe some of the audience knows, but like I had stopped just talking about Francis back in August. It just was a matter of, I felt like there was diminishing returns. There was more, everybody knew where I stood on him. Everybody knew where he stood. And I just was like, the constant just continuing to complain about what he did, I just didn't see any real benefit to it. Not that I thought he was also a great pope or became a pope splainer or anything like that, but I just didn't see the purpose. So then when he died, and it's like, okay. And then I did, right after he died, I wrote how terrible of a pope he was. But then when Leo was elected, before he's elected, I told myself, like, there's no real purpose to jumping in and attacking him. Like, for me, at least, like, you know, some people tell a story like when Francis first came out in the Loggia, they immediately like, oh, this is going to be a problem. I never heard of him and didn't know who he was. So I was like, well, let's, you know, he's a pope. Let's see what happens. And so I didn't start really kind of publicly criticizing until a couple years into it, because it's like, what's the point? Like, let's just let him get his feet set. Let's, you know, see where he really is going with this and just kind of leave it alone. And I think the same thing's true for whoever's going to be elected after Francis. Like, my expectation was that the likely thing was he'd be better than Francis, but wasn't going to be a superstar, wasn't going to be that great. And so my expectations were pretty low. So it's like, when Leo says something that's got the kind of synodality ring and, you know, kind of the Francis talk, stuff like that just doesn't bug me. But I think it's because I was like, well, that's just the church we're in right now. What did you expect? We're not getting Athanasius Schneider as the bishop. So to me, it's like, so far, at least, he's far better than Francis, and he's not quite as good as, you know, Benedict. But it's like, okay, that's kind of in the range I was expecting anyway. And so, like, I just think, like, people need to chill out, let him go, let him cook, and just see what happens. And I think there's been, you know, positive things. In fact, I have an article come out tomorrow at Crisis about the fact that his kind of traditional piety that's showing, you know, speaking in Latin, praying in Latin, and the Eucharistic procession, Corpus Christi, stuff like that. That's good, even if he is like a post-conciliar, like, you know, hardcore guy, because for two reasons. First of all, it's just objectively good when you do things like that. And then secondly, it allows, like, the young priest who got shot down because he said a couple prayers in Latin during the mass by his senior pastor, by the bishop, or wanted to, you know, basically encourage an altar rail. Well, now that young priest can be like, well, you know, the Pope's doing it. Yeah. Why can't I? So I think that it kind of trickles down. I mean, I think we forget how bad Francis was. Like, he literally was all out attack on tradition. And so just getting a reprieve of a guy who clearly is not doing an all out attack on tradition, I think it's a good thing. And so, like, I'm just not going to go down the let's find another thing to complain about.
Yeah, it's all right. I just think he's boring. he's just boring.
Isn't that, like, what we want?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't want somebody who's going to, like, make X blow up every morning. Like, I want somebody that we don't actually talk about. In fact, I'd love it if a pope would just I'd love the next pope just shut up most of the time and just did nothing other than just kind of clean house internally. So, like, I'm down with boring, because I'm a boring person. So, you know, that's probably why I want it.
I'm fine with the boring part. Okay. So we just saw
that was the problem. You literally said that was the problem.
Well, I just think he's boring. I didn't say it's the problem. I think the problem is actually is that
you want more content for your show, is what
that's
you want.
for sure, right? I mean, this guy.
It's all about the clicks, baby. The views, the sponsors. I mean, come on.
And Catholic content creator. I mean, we're gonna have to go back to the days of just, like, fighting,
actually learning about the faith. Imagine that.
I know that'd be awful.
So, all right. So I'm more concerned with personnel choices that he's still making, because I think there's a danger to a guy who, like, he hasn't said anything controversial. There's no news stories to report on. I mean, if anything, the things he's doing, like, it has a very Catholic veneer to it. And don't even say that, though. It might have to. It has the Catholic veneer to it. It's much easier to talk to Protestants, I would say, so far, right? Because one of the biggest impediments to evangelization was Protestants throwing quotes from Francis. It's like, you got a communist pope. What are you talking about? So it is much better in that respect. I am still very concerned with his personnel choices, and he's been in for 2 months, and I'm still seeing dioceses put restrictions on the Latin Mass. Now, Texas got a 2-year extension that they put in the request, right? So I'm not sure
what do you really expect them to do so far? Like, okay, we've had Detroit, we've had Charlotte that have been awful, but they were literally put in there by Francis to do that.
Yeah.
And so now they did it. It's not like, I think we have to recognize the Pope in Rome isn't like, okay, boy, I really see, Twitter's blowing up because of Charlotte. I better do something about this today. No, a smart Pope at least is going to take his time, going to evaluate, determine what do I need to do. And also, I don't really see his appointments like they're not. There's some. I'm not a big fan of some, but they're not like that. They're not that real controversial ones. He's keeping his guys in, Francis guys in so far, but they all do that. Yeah. Like if he renews Tucci and Roche and people like that, then yeah, that's a real. But things like he appointed that woman or something. Of course he did. That's just kind of where we are.
We've had bad appointments for the last 70 years. That's
70 years. Yeah.
JP2 had terrible appointments. Terrible appointments.
Yeah.
That was the worst part of his pontificate. And like, we would love to have a JP2 today.
Yeah, it is true, right? Like, so if he would have came in and just started cleaning house, it's just such a weird place to be where I'm watching trads, will like point out, oh, Leo did this, and he said the Our Father, he said the Pater Noster this morning, and then you'll still get Mike Lewis and the lefties going, oh, but look, he said synodality, and you have these. It was like there was such clarity under Francis as much as it was ambiguity. It was like we knew where we stood. It kind of brought.
This is just the beginning of a pontificate. Everybody's trying to claim him as their own.
Yeah.
Because we're hoping that we can shape the narrative and say, okay, he's our guy. And trads do it as much as the liberals do it and the progressives do it. But I do think that like ultimately that's kind of what he's trying to do, is being this unifying force where like everybody likes Leo. Like there's a real benefit to that. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't get you the as many views on X. So sorry, Anthony, you're Elon won't be as much. But there is a real benefit that like, go ahead and like, well, I don't know who's that gnome who's like, it says he's a theologian and he always is posting about what the Pope says, and it's like progressive stuff. Anyway, he's a teacher somewhere and he calls himself a theologian.
Rich Raho.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and like, he's just going to continue to do that over and over again and just let him do it. It's like, whatever.
Austin Ivory wants another biography job.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, look, it is. We went through a rough 12 years. I think the interregnum period was really nice. It was like, it was just such a nice feeling of being in the interregnum, and it was like,
let's give us a 2-year, man. Let's just do forever.
Anthony's like, being a SETI kind of nice, actually.
Revealed. We always wanted to be SETIs after all.
It was pretty fun. But it's also it's been kind of nice to not have every single day the daunting headline of what the Pope just did to upend years of tradition, and even like little things like Leo walking with the Eucharistic procession, and like he's got some Catholic piety to him that we haven't seen in a very long time, which is absolutely refreshing.
I think we're gonna find that maybe he's similar in Francis in terms to some of his beliefs about synodality, and he's obviously a modernist. Like, we were not going to not get a modernist pope, but it looks like he actually likes the Catholic faith, and actually maybe believes it. So that's a positive, I would say, over what we had.
Yeah, and I think again, I don't think you can underestimate how important that is. in the trenches, because I saw that because I was working for a diocese when Francis was elected. And once Francis started saying this crazy stuff, I heard that over and over again. Like, I tell the story, like literally when Francis was elected, I was meeting with his deacon and this lady who were trying to get a pro-gay group started in the diocese. And I was shooting them down. And then he got elected. They came back to me months later when he said, "Who am I to judge?" And they're like, "Well, now Francis allows it, so we can set this up, right?" And I had to explain to him, no. And like to them, it's like, why is this layperson telling us we can't do what the Pope just said we can do? Mm-hmm. And that happened so many places, so many times. It empowered the worst bishops and the worst priests. And so even a Pope who, like you said, might be a modernist, the fact that he is doing Eucharistic procession, that emboldens the young priest who is more Orthodox, more traditional, and say, hey, let's do it. Hey, Father, pastor, let's do a Eucharistic procession. Look at what the Pope did and everybody loved it, type of thing. And that brings in souls. So I really think that, I'm not saying it's everything. Obviously it's not everything. The synodality stuff is a bunch of hogwash and crap, but like at the same time, I think it trickles down that traditional piety that then emboldens and helps the traditional young priest. I don't mean like a traditionalist, but more just like he leans more traditional, and he gets shot down by everything for the past 12 years.
What do you make of the so in the UK there was a priest who denied communion to a politician who was, I don't know if he was supporting euthanasia or something like that. Yeah, it was
assisted suicide.
So the priest denied him communion, and then the bishop actually came out and said, no, we're not. So I have the article. Rob, can you bring up the Pillar article about that?
I think he just said, like, we don't do that.
Yeah, we don't do that. He said basically, like, the church, it is not the church's position for us to do that, right? So you still have this boomer class in the hierarchy.
Oh yeah.
Which something happened today where I was just like, they're no different than the secular boomers. And I know we have older people who watch our show. We're not saying every single boomer. You guys don't have to get defensive. Calm down.
I'm so tired of like the boomers being so defensive about the boomer tag.
It's like we're talking in generalities here, and it's like the boomer generation kind of had this mentality. It's like, well, I gotta get mine. I want my retirement home in Florida. I want to go on my cruise every year. And I feel like that's the boomers in the hierarchy are very similar. It's like they're terrified to say no to women, right? So they're surrounded by these women in their diocese, and they're just afraid to say no to them. Just like most of the men who raised us, if your parents were boomers, the wife basically ran the household. The husband was kind of just like a yes man. And I kind of see those men as the same thing. Like they don't want any static from the press. They don't want to deal with any kind of they just want to get through this, and they almost don't care what happens to the generation after them. They don't care if inflation's through the roof and these kids can't afford homes. They don't care if the dogma is intact. It's a very like equal thing to what we're seeing in the culture and secular boomers happening in the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in our diocese here in Cincinnati, they had a big restructuring where priests were moved all over the place. And a priest friend of mine actually was moved to another parish, and he's the pastor, and he had an associate pastor who was also solid. And basically there's a huge revolt going on there. Why? Because the boomers can't stand him, because he's simply trying to do things the way the church wants them to be done. I mean, and he's not trad. He's not trying to even do Latin or anything. He's just simply the basics of, we're not going to do all the boomer mass stuff. We're not going to do all this stuff. And it's like, they are just in full revolt, and they're going to the paper and the local paper and saying, oh yeah, how it was a loving church before this. Now it's rigid and blah. I mean, all the boomerisms are just, and it's like, that's going on a lot of places, and it's ridiculous. And the fact is, though, we still have to wait a while before they all die out. I mean, the youngest boomers are still in their 60s. I mean, they still have a ways to go. And so for bishops, 60s is young, remember. I mean, that means they still have 15, 20, 30, 25 years left. So we still have, most bishops, I would assume, are boomers. And so because of that, we're going to be ruled by them for quite some time. But they are dying out, and their influence is dying out. And so, it's
such a strange mentality. And I think it was Dr. Kwasniewski said, like, there's a difference in Francis, who was like, he was an older boomer, right? So he was, I think, ordained as the new rite was coming in, where Leo's my dad's age. He's like 69, I think, or 68 or 69. I think he was born in 55. And like, my dad doesn't remember the Latin Mass when he was a kid, because he like made his communion in it, but then the new rite came over, you know? So it's like, where Francis was part of the revolution, and where you got a couple of years between him and Leo. Now, Leo, it's kind of like the revolution was already kind of set in place by the time he came in. So he's not as like diehard hippie like the older guys.
I think there's like a personal attachment to Vatican II by that generation that will never be broken until they die. Yeah. And the fact is, once you get to the younger boomers, but especially then Gen X, then you get people who are just, they were born after. If you're born after Vatican II, you don't have that personal attachment. Like, or even if you were very young at it, you don't care that much. Like, okay, the most important thing is we have to keep Vatican II intact. We have to make it the guiding star of everything. And so I think that's what we're seeing more than anything, is just like people don't have this emotional attachment to Vatican II, where it's like, oh my gosh, you can't say anything about that whatsoever. And Leo's on the tail end of that. I mean, he's not going to be anti-Vatican II, and I'm not even saying anti-Vatican II. He's going to still be completely attached to it.
Still using the lingo.
Weakening. I mean, you saw JP2 was 100% invested in Vatican II. Ratzinger 100% invested in Vatican II, because they're both there and influential there. And then you have Francis, who is kind of weirdly obsessed with Vatican II. And I think Leo, all of a sudden, now you're starting to see the decline. It's going to be each successive pope is likely to be less emotionally attached. I'm not saying they're going to disown Vatican II, but at least they're not going to be like, okay, everything has to run through that lens. And I think long term, I do think we do see things going in the right direction. I think Leo's like the first step of that. I'm not saying he's the big leap to everything's great, but I do think he's the first step in that direction.
I was really hoping to the thing is that the whole synodality thing, like like Leo doesn't even know what it means. Like he said something, he's like, what synodality is to me is a state of being. It's like, I hate that language, the being church nonsense. It's so
being
annoying.
Church just makes me cringe every time.
It's the cringiest freaking thing in the world. It's just ugh. But okay, so now that priest, his bishop comes out and tells him that, right? Like, and I asked people, I was like, should this priest obey his bishop in this situation, right? And to me, I would think it's bordering on mortal sin to force a priest to give communion to somebody who's a public unrepentant sinner. Like, I don't know.
Do we know if the bishop ordered the priest to give him communion, or if it more was just a statement where he was just saying, we don't do that in the church, and then we don't know what happened behind the scenes? I mean, it would be interesting to know what he actually told the priest he had or could not do. There is an argument to be made that the priest could have handled it a bit differently. I always get annoyed by that, though, because he did the right thing ultimately. And it's like, then we want to nitpick how he did it. But the fact is that we don't know yet what he did. I mean, I think that a priest is obligated, if he knows that this person, I mean, he knows in this case, he's promoting assisted suicide. He knows he's giving public scandal. Therefore, by canon law, he should not be receiving communion. I mean, the priest is, but we know what will happen to him if he refuses to do what the bishop wants. And he'll get canceled, and he won't be practicing, ministry anymore.
Yeah, I think like even the Diane Montagna article now, it's because everybody was making such a big deal out of it, and it's like Francis lied about this, but I think we all kind of knew. Most of the bishops are kind of, like I said, like they just don't want static in their diocese, and it's like, I know in our diocese, like our bishop just ignored it. Traditionis. He just totally ignored it. He just pretended he's also not like pro Latin Mass. He just kind of like, he speaks to the pastors of those parishes, and the pastors tell him, like, look, this is a stable community. They're not some crazy schismatics or anything. These are just young people who love the Latin Mass. They drive from all over the island to come here, and they have, like, there's men's groups that come out of it. There's Bible studies that come out of it. Like, they're very vibrant, beautiful young communities. So our bishop was kind of just like, unless like they actually force me to do something, I'm just going to pretend it didn't happen. I think there was
Tell
a
me
lot
which
of
one
bishops
Anthony
like,
goes to. We'll shut that one down, but the rest we're good on. So, yeah, and a lot of bishops did that. That's the thing. So I said today about this, about what Diane reported, was everybody knew it was a lie. Like the supporters of TC knew it was a lie. The critics of TC knew it was a lie. Yeah, maybe some of the sycophants, like a Rich Rahu or whatever his name is, or Mike Lewis, maybe they actually believed it. But like all the bishops who supported it knew it was a lie. Everybody knew it was a lie because you had evidence right afterwards. The fact that the bishops didn't jump on board with this wholeheartedly, like you would think if they had really said, we need to do this, you would have had many more bishops jumping on, not so many ignoring it like yours did. So the fact is, everybody knew it was a lie. The problem is that that's how, like, socialists or communists or whatever, that's how they work. Is they live based on lies, as Rod Dreher's thing, and what's it, Solzhenitsyn said.
Yeah.
It's like the idea is like they didn't care that everybody knew it was a lie. Francis knew that everybody knew he was lying. But he knew he could still get what he wanted because no bishop, nobody with authority would call him a liar while he was in the chair of Peter. He knew we had enough years of hyperpapalism built into us that nobody would ever just say, you're lying. I know you, and here, you're lying about this. This isn't what the bishops wanted. And because of that, all it was people like us saying he's lying. And it's like, oh, those crazy trads. Who cares what they say? And so that allowed it to happen. And so in a lot of dioceses, they did implement it very harshly. So, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's diabolical, frankly. And I mean, if you think about it, there's no other way to put it than Francis lied publicly in a church document in order to shut down and destroy authentic Catholic communities.
Yeah.
How can you make that look better than it is? I mean, that is just like, there's just no going around the fact that was just evil. I mean, it was evil just even if he hadn't lied. But like the fact that he literally lied to make this happen so he could destroy authentic Catholic communities, faithful Catholic communities that were thriving, that people were, bringing their kids to baptism and in confirmations and conversions and all this stuff. I have a hard time seeing how a pope could do something much worse than that. Honestly, because
do you think the whole thing that happened with Charlotte a couple of weeks ago, where the bishop like gave this whole list of things he was going to ban ad orientem, he was going to ban kneeling for communion, all these things, and then there was this huge outburst online, and I saw a lot of people saying, especially from that diocese, were like, why are you doing this online? Like, but I do think the pressure of seeing pillar articles written about it, it was written about in Catholic Herald, it was like all of the publications and all of the podcasters coming out and like reacting to it, it clearly had an effect on the bishop, where
Absolutely.
he said, okay, you know what, I don't want this backlash, I'm going to tone it down, and we'll wait to see if anything comes out of Rome. Like, do you think something is coming out of Rome in October?
Well, I think that I would put it this way. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody leaked it to Diane purposefully because they wanted to basically kind of push or nudge Leo into dropping Traditionis Custodes. That would not surprise me at all. I mean, she's such a good journalist. She might have just was able to get it no matter what. But it wouldn't surprise me if somebody was like, okay, now's the time. France, we never get, because the truth is, releasing when Francis was Pope, what does that really help? It doesn't that much, because it's not like he's going to rescind it. I mean, he knew he was lying when he did it. He'd just be like, okay, whatever. We'll just ignore it. We'll just gaslight people to say, no, it's not true. But now that releasing it after he's dead, it at least gives the opportunity. Like, I don't think Leo is just going to come out and say, okay, we rescind Traditionis Custodes. I think what will happen is, over a series of actions, it will just be known, you don't do this anymore. Leave him alone. Let him go, and maybe he'll do certain things to encourage it, the Latin Mass a little bit in ways that Francis never would have, which isn't the ideal. Obviously, the ideal would be he just says, okay, Traditionis Custodes is gone, we're back to Summum Pontificum, and he celebrates Latin Mass himself. But like, let's be realistic. So I just think it'll eventually fade away, because what these are, like Detroit and Charlotte, are both like those are Francis appointments that were done specifically for this reason. I've been to Detroit and I've talked to a lot of Latin masters there, including some of the priests who celebrate the Latin Mass there. And that is tragic because Detroit was probably the best diocese in America for the Latin Mass. It was the most widespread. It was in so many parishes, and the last bishop was fine with that. And they all knew. They all knew when a new bishop came, it would get shut down.
That was under because I remember that was Voris's bishop, right? Wasn't he?
Well, there's been a couple since Voris started. I'm blanking on the guy's name.
He was like the head of
or Vingeron.
Yeah,
Vigneron, I think.
Yeah,
which is
and
interesting.
He was fine. I mean, he like I said, they really had a widespread. I mean, Latin Mass was there. I mean, I went there and I spoke at. I mean, I spoke at 3 parishes there about like deadly indifference, and most dioceses would never let me speak at their parishes. And
when did that start? When did you? Because I would imagine. When did you write Deadly Indifference? What year was that?
2021. It came out a couple months after I became Era Crisis. Really, Era Crisis also was my death knell for that. You want to hear a funny story? I'm not allowed to speak in the diocese where I used to work directly for the bishop for 5 years.
That's funny. Wow. So were you a public figure before you went to or were you just kind of like writing for places? And
I was like, I mean, public figure is I wrote my first book in 2010. I had a popular blog back in the day. New Advent would run my articles all the time back in 2010, 2011, things like that. I went to work for a diocese. I did speaking engagements. I wrote Old Evangelization for Catholic Answers in 16 or 17, something like that. And so like I was writing, my social media presence was growing. So people knew who I was and stuff like that. But it was really when I started with Crisis that then it's like, okay, that kind of broadened. And that's when people started to realize this guy, he's more. Well, it's 2018. I really came out as more of a trad, and so then it was like things started to become like, okay, you're not going to get to speaking engagements. And the truth is, I hate to travel. I like speaking, but I hate to travel. So it's like,
but you were never because I know you went to Franciscan, right? Like you were one of Scott Hahn's students and stuff, but like you were never in the Catholic speaker circuit during the heyday of.
Like not on the level of those guys. I would do some talks, but I was never at like the level of where I'm speaking at like conferences and stuff like that. No.
Okay. Yeah. Cause that was a weird.
I know all those guys though.
Yeah. Of course.
Okay. Let me tell you a little secret. Those guys often contact, I'm not saying names, but a lot of them contact me often to say, oh, hey, I love what you just said. And it's something they don't feel like they're allowed to say.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't mind. It's like, fine. If they're doing good work for the church, I'm not, but I just think it's kind of funny.
I think there's a lot of that. I think,
yeah. Oh yeah.
I think there was a few years of where a lot of the guys, you think under Francis, like how many people were irked, but couldn't say so publicly. Like I remember being upset about it. Like, I learned my Catholic faith from these guys, and then we go through this insane period, and they all kind of just keep going about things as business as usual.
I have no problem with like a person on the speaker circuit, that type of person, if they say nothing about Francis. That's fine. Not everybody's required to say something about it. I just didn't like it when they would like defend him in ways they shouldn't have defended him. It's like, just leave it. And a lot of them did stop doing that. Like early on, they were big Pope defenders, and they kind of started to realize, okay, this isn't somebody we want to defend as much. But yeah, I'm not going to get on somebody just because they just didn't say anything. I mean, because they do some good work. I mean, some of these, I have seen they say some good things. They do some good work. I never understood the desire to like knock down other like kind of good Catholics. And this is a guy who literally just had a whole video today where I was knocking down Bishop Barron, so I should probably shut up.
Yeah, but I don't think like criticizing something Barron said.
I actually don't either. Yeah.
Like I mean, it's like I criticized Matt Fradd and Voice of Reason's conversation, but it's like I wasn't making ad hominem attacks on Matt.
Right.
Like it's like you guys said something.
I think it's okay. Yeah. If you say something, this is what the case was with Barron. I just felt like his whole thing about salvation non-Catholics is very muddled and very misleading, and I wanted to speak out against it. And I had literally just written an article called "In Appreciation of Bishop Barron" like 2 weeks ago or something. So it's not like it's a whole thing. And same thing with, I didn't watch that thing with Fradd and whoever that other dude is. I had never heard of that guy, and I'm still not sure what his name is. Like
His
just
name's
about a month
Alex
ago.
Barato.
But I don't follow that stuff as much. I just saw the video where he called Taylor Marshall trash or garbage. And honestly, to me, when you do that, I will admit it. I write you off unless you apologize later, because it's like, if you call somebody else, another fellow Catholic, garbage, like I wouldn't even call Father James Martin garbage. I mean, it's like, that's just a line. And he did it in kind of a more intimate setting where it's almost like he's just doing it to a bunch of people. It's like, that just is,
Well,
I'm sorry.
somebody just said the picture of Frad at a TLM. Frad has been to TLMs. What was wild about that pic was that it was Frad at a SSPX chapel. Frad went to the SSPX, which is interesting because,
I like I said, I didn't see that thing, but I know. I mean, I don't. Yeah, Matt's a good guy.
I agree. I agree.
He's pro tradition, very pro tradition, pro TLM. I don't know what he said on that thing. I just know he is. And, people are like, we're railing on for going to Byzantine church. He never became like a Byzantine, Eastern Catholic. And I don't think there is one where he lives now. And so he's just
my issue is not with, we've talked about this before, but I have no issue with somebody who has to escape like some mundane Novus Ordo.
Right.
And they go to an Eastern liturgy because it's the only thing that, like, I have no issue with that. I only take issue when somebody does that and then they talk about how trads need to be put in line and traditionis was a good thing. Like, that's when I take issue with it. It's
or
like,
they defend the Novus Ordo. It's like, dude, you don't even go to it yourself. I
exactly.
agree. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Like the state of liturgy in America is so abysmal. It's like we all have to do what we have to do to get by. We do have a couple of super chats here that I want to get to. Everyone claiming him. Oh, this is about Leo. Everyone's claiming him, or is it another flavor of Juan-Peronism? Let's give everyone what they want to hear. Leo the Catholic. Yeah, I just think it's too early to know.
Wait until he actually goes after trads or something like that, which he hasn't done. I mean,
or a document.
Right. Yeah. Like Francis, he really did go after us. And so the Peronism, I thought people really overplayed that whole thing. Like he didn't really do anything for us. He never was like trying to play our side.
No, he was just fully on the other side.
Yeah. And I think like Leo, like I think he's legitimately likes these traditional forms of piety. You're not that good of a speaker in Latin as he is unless you've done it a lot. No. You haven't done it a lot unless you like it. I mean, maybe it's just he likes it, smells, it's his preference, smells and bells. But still, I think it's I think
there's something to having there's something to having a Catholic identity, right? Like I always loved Michael Matt's conference name, the Catholic Identity Conference, because what it felt like under Francis was that we were losing our Catholic identity. Like he wanted us to be no different from anything else you saw out in the culture. So to see Leo bringing out more traditional vestments and stuff, like I understand why people are getting a little excited even over the simple things.
Yeah, and I think again, it's objectively good. Yes, and like the question is, I think I saw somebody in chat say like, when do we kind of get over the honeymoon? I think it's not like necessarily a honeymoon of like should be the default. We've forgotten what the default is because of Francis. A lot of people are young enough that 12 years of Francis, they don't really know much of another pontificate than his. And so I totally I empathize, I sympathize that they have some PSCT or whatever it's called. I get that. But like you have to take a step back and say, okay, let's sit in the 2,000-year tradition of how we treat popes. And we do give them a certain benefit of the doubt. We allow a certain amount, we're not like looking for a reason. Like with Francis, got a point where we were looking for what was wrong. That's why I checked out of criticizing him at the end, because I think that's spiritually dangerous. And I think we've seen that. I think a lot of people, they really harm their souls. Francis harmed their soul. I mean, they have to take some responsibility for it, but they got so angry, so mad, so cynical about the papacy, about Francis, about the church, that I really think it harmed their soul. And so I just caution that the norm should be, we just simply go about our business. We're not obsessed with everything he says and does. If he says something or does something that's really egregious, like really does like go against the Catholic faith, something like that, then yes, some people, not everybody has to, could say something. Like I think people were overreacting to the whole miracle, the sharing, the miracle of the loaves. Like he wasn't saying there's no miracles. He wasn't saying that wasn't
Look
a
at
miracle.
you, Pope, splaining away the most
Well, here's the
annoying
thing.
freaking.
It is still a boomerism to compare that to sharing. Don't get me wrong. Like if I ever hear a priest say that, I cringe at it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it's not like people were saying, oh, he's denying Jesus's miracles. That's not what he did.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
I
let's
think
just
that, I think that homily is pre-written for every pope to go out and say now. Like, at this point, it's just like we've
wait
heard
till
that
I
same
can't wait till that
stupid
dies.
homily so many times. It's like we don't want to hear about the miracle of sharing, guys.
They
Like,
taught it in their homiletics courses in seminary, probably.
If that is not the most boomer homily ever written,
it's
I don't
so
know
bad.
what is. I mean, it's just we have been cursed with that damn homily for
It's
decades
forever.
now.
I need an edit of Khan from Wrath of Khan cursing Kirk with his final breaths, but it is Francis, for hate's sake. I spit my last breath at thee.
Taffy, if you're watching, you have a mission.
Yeah. True synodality is listening to the bishops and reconsider TC. Viva Cristo Rey. Yeah, I think so. Well, that's what I think everybody's hope is that if he actually did synodality in a more like instead of like trying to push through a predetermined agenda,
Right.
it would be very different, right? But like that's what Francis used synodality as a vehicle to push through an agenda. But if you actually did go and listen to like what these young people are saying about their experience with the Latin Mass, maybe you would get something a little bit different.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, if I'm like hanging out with people and we're having a theological academic debate, I'm going to defend the idea of synodality because I actually think it's a good thing in the sense of the way the early church operated. I think there should be a more decentralized way the church operates. I don't think it should be 100% centralized at the Vatican like it has been. So I would like say that. But the problem is that's nothing at all. It's literally not even anywhere in the same ballpark as the synodality that's been shoved on us.
Yeah.
Because synodality does not include the laity. That's the most important thing to remember. Synodality is synods of bishops getting together and talking about the Catholic faith, debate in local synods. Like, so for example, instead of having the USCCB, a permanent bureaucratic institution, instead what should happen is every maybe 5 years, 10 years, not on regular schedule, but like, on a regular basis, all the bishops of America get together for a synod. Maybe they meet at a monastery in Kansas, not a hotel in Baltimore, and they don't have like their whole like bureaucratic, staff setting it up, but they get together and say, okay, what are the issues of Catholics in America? Let's address that. Let's produce a document. Let's produce like a plan for addressing that.
Like the Baltimore Catechism came out of the Baltimore Synod.
Exactly. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's a great use of synods. That is true synodality. I mean, nobody would complain about the Baltimore Catechism. It was a beautiful effect of an actual synod. Synodality now is just the term they decided to glom onto to say, okay, now we're just going to be a democracy. I'm going to pretend to be a democracy because under Francis, it was a totalitarian dictatorship that pretended like they were a democracy. Like we're going to listen to the lay people. Lay people, frankly, I mean, as 3 lay people here, we should have no say in a lot of this stuff. Really, it should be the bishops who get together, they make these determinations, and then we move on.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like when I saw that thing with the UK bishop saying that after the priest denied the communion, it's like are these men Catholic? Like are we like? Is the faith I was taught the same faith these men believe? And I don't know if it is, but like we still owe them, like we're still subject to it. Really is a bizarre time in the church. St. Ambrose refused communion to Theodosius until he publicly repented. What do you mean the church doesn't do that? Yeah, on that topic. Cigar mode, thank you guys. Yes, we have no wine holdover fund. We lost our sponsor for 2 months. Don't be cheap.
But I do have wine to hold us over. So
we have wine. We just don't have the fund anymore.
I just got to say something. I remember being one of the first guests on the Anthony Abate show, whatever you called it back then. Maybe it was Avoiding Babylon. I don't remember.
It was.
You were so humble. You were like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to talk about, like, I'm not going to get involved in the controversies. I'm just going to talk about, like, being a better Catholic, stuff like that. And now look at you. You're corporate. You're begging for donations. We're talk about Matt Fradd and like going to the SSPX. You have sold out, brother, completely.
Eric, you have no idea. I will say this.
I gotta call you out on it, man.
We'll always like we even towards the end, like, you know how you stopped talking about France? Like, I think all of us just had such a Francis fatigue by the end of his pontificate. Like, it was almost tiresome. Like, I think, like, if something huge came, like when Fiducia Supplicans came out, we talked about that, but like, I just didn't care anymore by the end of it. But there is something too when you do have that little bit of persecution, that it kind of fires up the laity to take their faith a little more seriously, and like it's a danger to just have there be no, like whether it comes from the like all right, so that's what it is. I think all of us before Francis had always expected the Cardinal Francis George, he was in Chicago. Yes. Cardinal, remember how he put that statement out? He goes, "I expect my successor to in 2 or 3 successors, they would die in prison.
Predecessor would die in bed. I would die in jail, like in jail. My predecessor died, like would be killed or something.
Would be a martyr or something like that. Yeah. So I think we all had this perception that the world would always hate us. And as things got more progressive in the world and they started trying to legalize gay marriage and things like that, the church would hold her position and her stance, and we would receive persecution from the world. But when we started getting that persecution from within the church, I think it sent all of us for a loop. Like, none of us were expecting that we were getting in trouble by the hierarchy for being Catholic. Yeah. It was a weird time. Well,
2 things grew the traditional Latin Mass more than anything in this country, at least: COVID and Francis. Yeah. There's no question whatsoever. Like, I know Francis actually shut down. There's less parishes than there were TLMs than there were a couple years ago. But the fact is, there are far, far more people who attend the TLM, and not only that, but are very, or at least are trad friendly because of Francis, because they realize this is just, it's so ridiculous. And so you put COVID and Francis together. That's why we get, I don't believe the Pew survey said it's like, 2% of all Catholics attend TLM weekly. But at the same time, it's enough of a force that the Pew study actually asked about it. Think about that. It's not like they even knew what the TLM was 2 years ago. Now they're asking about the Pew study.
That's true, because Pew study does like everything. Like, they do evangelical surveys. They do like surveys on everything. So for them to even ask about the Latin Mass. What was that one, Rob? It's refreshing. What? It's refreshing to see a Catholic on the show instead of a double-digit IQ Freemason. How about getting on Jason Jones or Owen Schroyer?
Jason's great, man.
Yeah, maybe Eric could put us in touch with Jason.
Yeah, I'd be happy to put you in touch with him. That guy is the real deal. He's kind of crazy, but in a good way.
He's crazy, but I kind of like what he's doing. I mean, he's like on the ground in Palestine trying to.
That's what I mean. It's like, you cannot, like, I love when people, because I've run a lot of his articles, and I tell you what, oh man, I have lost a lot of subscribers to Crisis over the past just a couple of weeks even, but since October 7th, because we run Articles Critical of Israel. And, we have our podcast is more younger skewing. Our articles are more, not boomer, but definitely older. And so we have a lot of boomers, and boy, they do not take criticism of Israel. I know we're not going to talk about that right here, but the point about Jason is, I love it how people call him an anti-Semite, and he's literally in like Palestine and Israel helping like Jews who are like displaced. He's literally helping Jews. And these guys from their desks, behind their desk in America, are saying he's an anti-Semite because he doesn't think Israel should be destroying Gaza. It's like, shut up and go.
So, all right. Well, it's a good cue for us to switch over to the other side, because I definitely want to get into this topic. It's one where I think I go a little bit further than you do, but I know I just saw an article about you. They're putting you in there with Dave Smith and a couple of other people, just which I know you were thrilled about.
And Daryl Cooper. I mean, I was just like, this is beautiful. And the week I was on Tom Woods, Daryl Cooper was the guest 2 before me. I'm like, there we go, baby. But when I was in the same article as Dave Smith, I was like, okay, now we got there, man. I've been listening to him forever before he blew up.
Yeah, so have I. So all right, so we're gonna get into that, because I go further than you do, but I'm still also trying to find the proper Catholic response to this topic. So we're gonna go over to the other side. We're gonna discuss the JQ. Eric is a well-known anti-Semite, and yes, moral money. Go get it now. I actually
all the good anti-Semites they use Bitcoin.
Well, maybe we will even
Got to get money out of the central banks.
Actually, I'm sure people literally think probably that Bitcoin is a Jewish plot. So it's a Jewish plot too. That's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin. It's a Jewish plot to take over the world, and it's the currency of anti-Semites.
Well, how is it different from usury? Like, or even
interest.
Or interest, right? Like
how's what different?
Like, so you wrote the book Moral Money, right?
Right.
What do you see? I mean, I'm not going to ask you to explain the entire book, but like, give us a little synopsis of what your position is on Bitcoin.
Yeah,
because
basically, I came to the conclusion before Bitcoin was even invented that fiat money is fundamentally immoral. It's immoral. It violates natural law. It violates Catholic social teaching, and mostly because it can be inflated, which steals money from people. It harms the poor, all these things. The book explains why, but that's the major point. A moral form of money, far more moral, is gold. And gold is a moral form of money because nobody can fully control it. Nobody can just create it out of nothing. It has to be mined, all that stuff. The problem is before Bitcoin, I was like, well, gold is great, except for it just doesn't work in the modern world. You simply can't buy things at Amazon. You can't do whatever with gold. So I was like, wouldn't it be great if you had a form of money that was as efficient as fiat currency, but as moral as gold, and then Bitcoin is created? And, and so it's like, so I'm Satoshi Nakamoto is what I'm trying to say. I'm finally revealing myself to the world. I invented Bitcoin. Now,
when did you make your first billion?
What year was that? Did you see the guy who's mad at me? He literally said, I said something about we have to care for the poor. He literally said, you need to sell a Bitcoin and buy me a car so I can get to the Latin Mass. And I was like, I thought he was crazy. Then later he posted to somebody else. He said, Bitcoin billionaire rad trad Eric Sammons won't buy me a car. He hates the car. He hates poor. Now, I do want to say one thing. Anthony, I really do wish actually that you wouldn't call me a billionaire, because there's a lot of Bitcoin people who are getting like attacked literally physically because they think, and people might actually think, this guy thinks I'm actually a billionaire. To be a billionaire, I need to have like 10,000 Bitcoin. I think that's right. Which when I first started, Bitcoin was like $500 and I was working for a diocese. Do you really think I had enough money to buy? What is that? Like,
I started that bit as like a complete joke. Like it was just
I know.
Because you've always talked about Bitcoin, and I remember just being like, "Yeah, right, you Bitcoin billionaire," but like it was a complete throwaway joke. But
I know, like, this guy literally, I screen captured that and sent it to my family chat, my kids and stuff, and they were just dying. They were just like, and like my son-in-law was like, "Why am I even working if you're a billionaire, Dad?" Like,
that is true. Yeah, yeah. Why would you even be involved with any of this nonsense if you were that well off?
I mean, so I'm not a billionaire, a Bitcoin billionaire, anything like that. And so, like, yeah, but that's my basic point: is that Bitcoin takes the kind of usefulness, efficiency issues of fiat money and combines with the moral properties of gold, and it makes it, the most moral form of money we have. So that's the pitch.
You have
Buy
another
it at my
book
website, ericsammons.com. There we go.
I'm sorry, I actually ruined your plug. Plug that again.
You can buy it at ericsammons.com. You can buy it anywhere else, but you get a signed copy, and you can buy it with Bitcoin at my site, ericsammons.com, or with credit cards. So that's cool. My plug. Hey, if you're here shilling,
so you take usury to buy your book. Okay.
What's that?
You'll take usury to sell your book. I see how it is.
I don't understand the usury thing, because gold isn't usury and Bitcoin is the same setup.
You say credit card.
You said you can buy it with a credit card. You'll accept usury to buy
that is absolutely right. I will accept usury in order to buy my book. I mean, look at you. How are you getting these payments on YouTube? That's all usury.
Oh, man. We're slaves to the system. I don't know.
Now that this is a complete shill factory, I am shilling my books here all the time, man.
Let me tell you. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. You have another book coming down the pipe also?
I have 2 more books coming down the pike. So I have one that I hope comes out this fall. This is a big deal to me. It's a novel. It's a science fiction novel.
Oh, wow.
And it's set 100 years or so in the future. The world is recovering from an AI revolt, and the Vatican is now the powerful controlling the world.
And there's a
mysterious signal deep in space that the Pope sends a crew out to investigate. That's all I'll say.
All right.
So I have the first draft written. I'm working through it now. I'm hoping it gets out in the fall. Then I'm also, I've signed a contract to write a book, The Catholic Guide in Artificial Intelligence. So I'm going to dig
which is
very
interesting
deep.
Under Leo, yeah, that's a good
exactly.
time.
I'm a little nervous now though because I signed this contract like before Leo was elected, and I'm super excited about like he's into it and he's a mathematician and all that. But I'm a little nervous that like if his encyclical comes out on AI like after my book comes out or right before and it's published, I'm like I gotta get that timing right to like I mean obviously it's all about making money here. That's what we're about.
Yeah.
So I gotta make that to be cash. So I'm calling up the Vatican saying, "Yo, Leo, Papa, you got to make sure. Let's coordinate this, baby. Let's get this. It
would be funny if you said something in your book that contradicted the encyclical.
I don't think I will, but like, who knows? I mean, it's like that's the funny thing. So I don't think it will because I'm just going to apply Catholic principles to it. And like I've written some of it already, but like my introduction to this AI book starts off by saying artificial intelligence is amazing and unsettling, and that's kind of like the whole point of the book is like, it is, I think I don't get frustrated, but it's like kind of weird. People kind of discounting what it can do. Oh, it can do a lot. It's amazing what it can do. But at the same time, it is unnerving what it can do. Like it's weird.
I just know when I try to use Siri and I say diocesan, it can't get that out.
Or any other word.
Series is the running joke of the AI world because Apple can't do AI. They fail miserably and everybody makes fun of them for it. But like,
try to say synodal.
If you know how to use AI, like these chatbots, you can get a lot out of them. I mean, it's a little spooky. And you know what the spookiest thing is? The people who develop AI don't know why it's so good.
Yeah.
They don't even know. And it's like, and I got theories on that. I won't go to here, but like the point is like, so when that book comes, when the novel comes out, when the book comes out, I gotta be back on the show.
Of course, anytime. You're always welcome, Eric. You were one of the first people to come on with us, so you always have an open invite anytime you have anything to plug. So, all right, we're gonna go to the other side.
I gotta say one last thing though. I did look. You are like more than double my subscribers at YouTube, so I have to congratulate you.
I'm honestly very surprised he didn't bring that up.
He's a humble man. We've always known that about.
You want to know something? Subscribers mean nothing. Like our views are the same.
Hey, no one listen to Anthony. You all mean a lot to us. Okay.
They do. Well, you know what it does is it gets you like better guests or like people will be willing to come on and stuff. But like our views have been in the same arena for the past year. We get between like 5,000 and 10,000 views on every video.
Keep on making sure you focus on talking about Matt Fradd and people like that, and I'm sure you'll keep going up, buddy. No, I think it's great. I think it's great. I'm just kidding.
Those are the ones that always get us the big.
I remember when you passed me. And you made a big deal about it. And I didn't really pay attention because it's not like I actually watch your show. And so then all of a sudden I saw it today. I was like, oh my gosh.
Look, we are
great.
We'll do it on the other side, Rob. Bring us over to the other side because I'll tell Eric some stuff over there. Let's go over there.
Hold on.
Locals. Also, before you even cut it, Locals Thursday. I don't have work Friday. So Locals Thursday is going to be a fun show. Rob and I are going to be drinking some cocktails. It's going to be a very late
I don't work Thursday or Friday. I might be a few beers deep before we
Rob's going to be a few beers in. The last time I drank on the show, we got Hawaiian Pigeon. We read the Bible in Hawaiian Pigeon, which was a blast.
Which was probably blasphemous, but it was funny.
All right, take us out, Rob.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. Let me give everyone the link real quick.
Subscribe to Locals.
That's literally all you have?
Subscribe to Locals. We always, the YouTube feed always goes out on like just a
awkward. Okay.
Really
I'll actually play something real quick.